Well, hello and welcome back to the Resto Saga Workshop YouTube channel. And we're back at the Land Rover on the front axle and suspension rebuild. Quite a lot happening on this episode, so without any further ado, let's get stuck straight in. Back to pretty much where I left off in part 4. So this is the chrome swivel housing. This was the bit that was all pitted and nasty before I took the axle apart. And as you can see here, I fitted the bearing on for the sort of the carries, the half shaft. There's the Rialco bush in the top, and then there's the other taper roller bearing race in the bottom. You'll notice that there's something evidently missing here, and that is the little roller bearings. And I've left them in there and their carrier just while I tapped the bearing in, because I didn't want them flying everywhere, which is what has happened when I did that side. So lesson learned, and I did that one last as well. So really quite pleased with that. This time I used my leather and hide hammer, and you can see from the state of the head on the copper side, sorry, leather and hide, copper and hide, and on the leather side it's taken a little bit of a beating, but I think it's all a lot kinder to the bearing races. Softer metal, obviously copper, and leather if you can use it. The hide doesn't take chunks out of the metal, and you're much lower risk of damaging the chrome. So really would recommend one of those. They're not overly expensive. I think it was about 14 or 15 pounds off eBay. That's the number 2, and they do get a lot bigger. And I think the 2 is related to the weight. I originally bought that for the MG for knocking the spinners on, because you can use the leather side of it just to knock the spinners on, but it has its uses and I'm glad to have it in my tool set. A couple of things just to say before going any further. Believe it or not, I nearly did do it again and almost put the chrome swivel on without putting the seal on first, and the rubber boot. These rubber boots I did talk about before. And some interesting comments that people say the leather's still better. I'm prepared to give these a go. Got them from PI Blanchards. If they're good enough for the army, I'm sure they're good enough for me. I like that they're sort of a one-piece construction. I know rubber nowadays isn't just as good quality as probably as it once was. Probably environmental concerns and different compounds used, but I'm prepared to give those a go. I've put the rollers back in with their carrier, a little smear of grease just to make sure they don't go for a little wander. I will say that yes, you probably should put these bearings and carriers in using a press. I don't own a press. I'm not a professional mechanic. I work from home, and I'm self-taught. I have no formal training, and this worked fine for me the first time, so why would I not do it the second time? Yes, if you have a press, I would recommend using it. But just before I got a whole load of comments in the comment section saying that I'm an idiot, it worked once before, why would it not work again? I didn't put any excessive stress on the chrome sphere to warp it, and to be honest, if you can warp cast steel that thick, you're a better man than I am, and I would challenge anyone who said that will warp, because I would say it'll crack before it'll warp. But that's just my opinion. So rant over, time to put the seal on, the rubber boot on, and then get this fitted onto the axle with a little smear of gasket sealant around here. Again, just before going any further, this is the little seal, and this is screwed into the swivel housing, this bit here, and it sits in this groove, and it just slides over the face of the chrome swivel and keeps the oil that sits inside the swivel housing inside. Well, that's the idea anyway. It's an enormous seal. It's if you don't have a gator on like what I'm putting on, it's open to the elements, and that is why if this chrome gets pitted from stone chips, which, being realistic, is probably about 8 inches from the road surface, it is going to get stone chipped, especially if you do a lot of off-roading. The stone chips pit there, rust sets in, the chrome lifts up, and then this eats the edge of the seal as it rubs over it. So that's just a little bit of a theory as to why these are not the greatest of design, but it's fine. It's an old vehicle and it's a bit of character. So that sits there, and just while I'm attaching it, I'll push it off the chrome swivel, and then it'll be ready to mount in here. And there is the chrome swivel assembly ready to go on. It's quite a good demonstration of the little groove system there, and the seal just sits up into it and then this face of it is what sits inside the housing. Goes on fairly easily over this lip. Obviously a wee bit of WD-40 around the rubber just helps it slide over that flange, and it's just there. And I do my best to keep these two dimples at the bottom, because they will accommodate the drain plug, and I believe that's what they're for. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what they're for. So those are put at the bottom, and I know this is the bottom because it's the sticky out bit. You notice the top is slightly inset and this is slightly outset, and that's to allow for camber in the wheel and the steering to self-center. It's important to get those right, otherwise you'll put the bearings in the wrong holes, and that would be a bit of a disaster. So let's get this put on the axle. Ta-da! That is swivel, seal and gator assembly attached. Still one bolt missing here. It's the longer one, and I can't seem to locate the lock nut for it. I suspect my 2-year-old's run off and hidden it somewhere, but that's okay. I can order another one. It's not going to hold me up. I'll just get an at it later on. Just get one off eBay. It'll be fine. So the next job is really to build up the swivel housing. So that's the bit that goes over this. Add the bearing, the steering arm on the bottom, and then it'll be ready to pop on. As you can see, I've done my other usual trick of filling up that top cup with EP90, which is this, or 80/90 weight, GL4, natter, all the Facebook debates. It's the right oil. I checked with the handbook, so I fill it up just to soak that Realco bush, and I put a little silicone plug in the bottom just to stop it leaking out, so that can sit there overnight while I get the swivel housing built up and ready to be attached. Should be a whole lot quicker on this side, just because I've refreshed myself by doing the passenger side, and hopefully get back on the road nice and soon. All the suspension needs tightened up, and I've bought ratchet straps to put over the chassis and the springs just to compress the whole thing properly so that the spring heights are set correctly, and then I'm not going to lunch the bushes any quicker than I have to. So that's another job for another day, and I'll probably do the back while I'm at it because it's still not sitting straight despite 2 new springs on the back. But really looking forward to getting back on the road with this. It's been too long, and I'm sure you're all fed up hearing me saying that, so onwards and upwards. Okie dokie, so I have another piece on the bench here, and this is the swivel of the passenger side. You notice the steering arm only has one hole or mounting point in it, because it's only the track rod comes over here rather than a steering arm as well as a track rod. It's all nice and clean down here. These are the top threads coming through. The studs are on, the nuts are tightened up, just tighten up to torque. This is the drain plug. I have a bit of blue sealant around the face of the bottom of the arm because I was having leaks from there before I went to disassemble it all, and I have this tapered roller bearing which goes in the bottom of the swivel. This is obviously upside down. On the earlier model Land Rovers, the steering arms are on the top, but in the Series 3 they're on the bottom, so this all just needs to turn around 180 degrees. So what I'm going to do next is mount this onto the chrome swivel, which will sit in here. This will be in the roller bearing at the bottom, and put the pin in the top and torque down those bolts and try and work out how many shims I need using my fishing scale for the resistance once again. And that will be the second one fitted. And then the other thing to mention is over here, very ominous looking needle roller bearing. I've completely screwed up the fitting of the universal joint to the half shaft on the passenger side. I did get the races on, but I've completely messed this up. So, and I've no way to resolve it. I've tried multiple different ways, so I think I'm gonna have to take the angle grinder, cut my nice new, fairly expensive GKN universal joint, and I've ordered a new one, and that'll get tapped in carefully. But I can't afford to screw it up again, otherwise Mrs. Restisag is going to have a fit about the budget on this build. And then that'll go on, then the stub axle, then the brake back plate, then the brakes, and so on, the same as I did on the other side. And then hopefully get on the road before too long. Don't you love that when you actually find that you have the correct nut in your own box of spares? This is where I keep all my excess fasteners, metric, imperial. Someday I need to sort it out. There's even a spare drain plug in there, which I'd forgotten about. But I have found the correct size of nut for to hold on the swivel. So that is a major win. Don't need to order a new set. They are quite expensive. Being Imperial, they're actually fairly difficult to get a hold of, so that is a massive win. And I'm going to fit it onto the bolt, and this is the longer bolt here. Yeah, it's a bit rusty. I had it in vinegar for a little while, bit of copper grease, it'll be fine. And that's the longer one that holds on the steering lock stop. So that's a massive win. Really pleased with that. That's made my day. So that's a project. Just going to fit the swivel housing first of all, and we'll go over and check out the progress there. This axle is fighting me at every turn. I don't have enough of the correct size shims between the top pin and the swivel housing, and it's either way too stiff or way too loose. So I've had to order some shims off eBay. That's going to take a little bit of time to arrive, so that's going to stop play here, I'm afraid, until I can get those. I've got the lock stop in on that side, all tightened up, the U-bolts on. So what I'm going to do next is to tension the springs to the correct distance. This is something I haven't really done before, to my own shame and probably detriment of the life of the bushes in the suspension. But there is meant to be a set height between this saddle here and this chassis, and on a short wheelbase it's meant to be 10mm apparently. So I've bought some ratchet straps to put over the chassis, under the axle and spring and back up, and then I'm going to tighten the bolts front and rear, and also the U-bolts whenever it's under tension, and that should level it out, and do the same at the back as well. So let's give that a bash as per the workshop manual. So I'm losing light rapidly here, but suffice to say that this plan has not worked. I suppose it was probably a bit ambitious to think that I was going to get enough tension in this little ratchet strap handle, enough to compress the leaf springs, which are used to springing the entire weight of the Land Rover. So that hasn't really worked, so I'm going to have to think this again. I suppose the other plan I could try is to just put the Land Rover back on its wheels without tightening up the bolts, and then just load up the front of it, either with people or bags of cement or something like that, just enough to compress the springs. Slightly disappointing, I have to say, but sure, these things happen. Worth a try. The workshop manual does suggest either loading the vehicle or putting a jack underneath the chassis, I think it is, underneath the spring, with a chain over, and then tighten it that way. So you're using the jack underneath to push up, and the chain or strap or whatever to push down. So that might be worth giving it a go, but at the same time it's going to be quite difficult to maneuver that safely. At the end of the day, this is inside my house and I don't want things going off, bang, either going through me or through a wall or a floor, or damaging a person. So a bit of thought required in this, but I'll get there. Perseverance. So a bit of a rethink during a weekend and work and some free time to figure this out, and I have rethought the plan with the ratchet strap. So at least the money for the ratchet strap hasn't gone to waste, but unfortunately I can only do one side at a time. So the ratchet strap is over the chassis, under the chassis of the trolley jack, and I have packed into one of my biggest sockets underneath the spring bottom plate, and then jacked the, sorry I'm out of breath, and then jacked the spring up so that the space between the bump stop saddle and the chassis leg is within tolerance. And the green, so-called green Bible says it should be between 10 centimeters and 14 centimeters. So I've made this 12 centimeters, so it's smack in the middle of where I want it. I've then tightened up these bolts, this bolt and nut, and the 4 U-bolts all up to the correct torque, and now I'm just going to release it. It'd be nice to be able to do the two at the same time, but I don't think it's going to make any huge detriment. Didn't do this with the back wheels, so I think I'll do that in retrospect now that I have time. Make sure it's all set up nicely, and hopefully take some of the lean out of it as well, but who knows. As long as it makes the bushes last a bit longer and I'm not back doing this job again in another couple of years' time. And I've repeated the same thing on this side, compressing the spring with the strap and the jack. And I should note that I am torquing the U-bolts up under tension as well. That's not necessarily in the Green Bible, but to me it makes sense. as I've tightened these up before without them being under tension, they tend to strip actually. So if the spring is under the same tension the whole way around, I think the vehicle should sit nice and flat. Well, that's the theory anyway, but we'll soon find out. Just waiting on some shims to arrive in the post and then get them in there and get the swivel finished off. So I can only apologise, but the video didn't record for some reason. This is obviously back on the passenger side, a bit of a jump too from the driver's side. The shims have finally arrived for the driver's side to get the swivel done, but I went ahead and built up the hub, and I'll show you the bearings going in the next one. I suppose that's the benefit of doing a whole axle. You do everything twice, so if you miss the video, you can always do it for the other side. So, 2 bearings in the hub, one inner, one outer. They're 2 different sizes on the earlier Land Rover hubs. I think after 1980, 1984, something like that. 1980 must have been, they went to the same 2 bearings of the same size. But anyway, they're easily tapped in. Lots of grease to both the bearings and sort of within the little reservoir within the hub itself. It's impossible to get do this job and stay clean. And I've just got that held in there. So I'm going to put the nuts on here and tighten them up with the box spanner that I bought, which is hiding in there somewhere, and get on with that. And then put the brake drum on, and then time for some freewheeling hubs, I think. How about that? Pretty cool. So actual vehicle engineers and people who know what they're doing should look away now. I don't recommend this method, but this is the way I did it last time and it seemed to work for 10 years, so I'm going to do it again. The hub is held on by 2 nuts. This is the outer nut and there's a lock tab and there's an inner nut. And this is the hub nut spanner, and these are readily available from all the Land Rover parts suppliers and they're not very expensive. And it fits on there. I believe the size in millimeters is 52mm. So what you do is you tighten up the inner nut to take up the play in the bearings, so therefore they're adjustable, and if there's any wear in them later in the date, you can take that up. I've refitted the wheel without the brake drum, and that is just so I can test for play. Now you should do this with a dial test indicator and do it as per the Land Rover book, and that is the method I recommend. But I don't, because I don't own a dial test indicator, and as I said, this worked fine last time. What you want to do is grab the wheel at the top, 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and check for play. Basically, you want no play, just no play in the bearings, or an ever so slight wiggle. So what I do is I manually tighten up the inner hub nut just to the play just disappears and no more, and then put the lock tab on the outer nut, and then tighten over the lock tab, and that's it. Sounds awfully simple, but it is done by feel, and as I say, please do it by the workshop manual. I'm not responsible if your wheels fall off. Disclaimer over, back to the fun stuff. And this is the lock tabs hammered over. So now I'm just going to go through and check every nut and bolt I've done, the 6 round, the end of the axle, check the torques, either top of the swivel, and then hammer over all these lock tabs, because this side is pretty much finished. And as a little treat, you're going to see me fit some freewheeling hubs to this side. I'll probably do a separate video on the other side, just as an instructional video about fitting away freewheeling hubs. But just as a little treat for all of you who stay towards the end of these videos, I'll put a freewheeling hub on this side. I'm very excited about those. So this is the kit of parts from Fairey Free-Wheeling hub set. I got these off eBay secondhand. You might have seen them in my 2020 review. Really been looking forward to this for quite some time. My wife bought me these for my 30th birthday. Took a little time to get a really good set, as these sort of cups on the end do get quite damaged if they've been off-roading, but these are in pretty good nick, and they're not super shiny, because they wouldn't really fit in with the rest of the Land Rover, but they're also not absolutely destroyed, which is great. These are for the 24 spline hubs. Let's see, there's the 24 there, rather than the 10, which is fine because that fits my vehicle. I've also got some consumables from Land Rover optional equipment. A guy we see on Facebook by the name of Rob Mod. He supplies a lot of winches, freewheeling hubs, all the sort of the OEM or the original equipment that would have been available. Optional equipment, Land Rover optional equipment. Anyway, you can look him up. He gets these kits, so it's the wee screws, roll pins, felt washers, the correct sized O-rings, and these all important plastic bits. Nearly look like cable ties, but they're not. the guy I bought these off very helpfully sent these. But anyway, I'm going to do a full video on the Fairey Free-Wheeling hubs, but I'm just going to pop this on. This is the drive member. Just change the O-ring afterwards. Smear of blue sealant around here, and I've got nice new nuts and bolts to put it on with. So excuse the wind and the tumble dry in the background, but I have the hub face on. This is the inner, which sort of connects this bit here to the outside. And again, as I said, I'll explain this all in a future video. I've smeared this all with something called rock-all. I have no idea what it actually is, but it looks like a graphite greasy thing. And I actually had this left over from rebuilding my overdrive a couple of years ago, which is handy because it is quite expensive, but I think I'm probably going to need more than do the other side. So I'll keep that safe up there in the meantime. I'm going to put a new O-ring in here. This is all greased up. I have a new locking strip and a new circlip. I'm going to put this nut in and do the felt washer up and go from there. That should be it on. And then I'll put the brake drum on and the wheel on, and that's this side done. Easy as that. Not very easy, but as I say, I'll do a full video of the Fairey Free-Wheeling hub fitting for future, just so it's easier for people to find. But this is a wee treat for those of you who stayed to the end of the video. Sorry folks, a little bit premature in promising you some complete Fairey Free-Wheeling hubs, as this is spinning because it's a free-wheeling hub. I need to be able to lock the other side of the axle, but because it's not finished, that's not going to happen. So apologies for that if I got your hopes up, but I promise to get these fitted in a future episode and do a full fitting video, and probably a discussion video as well, because they're quite controversial in Land Rover circles. But anyway, enough of that. Sorry about that folks. I'll wrap the video up there, and thanks very much for watching.
I'm sure you'll agree there's plenty happening in this episode. Next time I really hope we can get those Fairey Free-Wheeling hubs fitted, and I'll be making a special fitting video for those actually in their own right. You can find me across all the social media channels. Hit the subscribe button, give me a like, and I'll catch you again next week. Cheerio!